anyway, and so was Catherine.
Prince William unexpectedly pulled back the velvet.
The steel lock beneath St. James's Palace clicked open, but Prince William didn't move. In his hands was a red leather portfolio bearing Queen Elizabeth's private wax signet, untouched for 4 years. 2 days earlier, someone inside Clarence House had attempted to bypass security and access Princess Diana's private vault. William didn't call a palace meeting or issue a statement. He simply unsealed his grandmother's final decree, revealing a legally binding clause that permanently barred Queen Camilla from ever touching his mother's legacy. The midnight audit at St. James's. The iron door sat deep in the basement of St. James's Palace. It had no brass plaque or royal emblem. A heavy keyhole sat above a modern digital keypad. In June 2026, the hallway outside stayed dark most of the week. Few people ever walked down those stone stairs. Prince William arrived at the bottom step past 11 o'clock at night. He did not bring a press team or personal secretaries. 2 independent trustees from the royal estate walked beside him. One carried a leather document folder, the other held a physical logbook bound in dark cloth. A security check had flagged an unusual entry 48 hours earlier. The system registered an administrative search query inside the palace network. Someone logged into the internal security database from a terminal inside Clarence House. The user entered a high-level code, requesting the exact physical key access protocols for the subterranean archives. The system rejected the command. The terminal lacked required clearance, but the system generated an alert sent directly to the chief security officer at Kensington Palace. William looked at the terminal log. The paper listed the exact timestamp, 2 minutes past 3 on a Tuesday afternoon. The user ID belonged to a senior secretary assigned to Queen Camilla. The vault holds the private physical estate of Princess Diana. It contains her personal journals, audio cassettes, unreleased correspondence, and private jewelry. Those items sit separate from the crown jewels. They do not belong to the state or the reigning sovereign. They exist under a private family trust, created in 1997. William used his master key to open the outer lock. He typed a 9-digit code into the electronic keypad. The door gave a dull mechanical click and swung open. Inside, the room smelled like aged cedar wood and cool air. Metal shelves lined the walls. Heavy acid-free archival boxes sat in long rows, each marked with a tracking number. William walked to the back wall. A reinforced steel safe sat bolted directly to the concrete floor. That safe holds the primary catalog ledger. It lists every item placed inside the room since the autumn of 1997. He pulled a bronze key from his pocket and opened the top drawer. The binding inside was clean and intact, but when he opened the first page, he noticed a loose slip of paper tucked inside the cover. It was an internal palace requisition slip, dated May 28, 2026. The document requested a temporary transfer of 6 storage boxes from the vault to private conservation studios at Marlborough House. The requested items included 3 velvet jewel cases, 2 bound volumes of personal letters from 1995, and a sealed metal box containing personal audio tapes recorded during Diana's final trip to Paris. The authorization line at the bottom remained blank. No trustee had signed it. No formal request had reached William's desk. Yet the paperwork had already been drafted and logged inside the internal palace mail system. Someone was preparing to move those items before asking for legal permission. William handed the paper to the trustee on his left. The trustee checked the inventory numbers against his master ledger. Every item on that list fell under the strict legal protection of the private Diana Estate Trust. Under those terms, no item leaves the room without written consent from 2 living trustees. William serves as primary trustee. His uncle, Earl Spencer, serves as co-trustee. Neither man had received an email, call, or memorandum about an upcoming conservation project. The trustee checked the physical seals on the safe doors. The tamper-evident tape remained unbroken. Nobody had physically entered the safe itself. The administrative attempt at Clarence House had failed at the digital barrier before anyone reached the keys. William stood in the center of the vault. He knew how palace machinery operated. Requests rarely started with formal demands. They began with quiet administrative memos, routine checks, and small requests for historical preservation. If an archivist accepted a routine conservation request, boxes moved quietly across London. Once an item moved into a general workshop, its legal status could become blurred. Items could be photographed or merge into public exhibition schedules. The timing made the attempt even more significant. 6 weeks earlier, senior aides at Buckingham Palace began drafting plans for a major royal heritage exhibition planned for 2027. Members of the planning committee suggested including select iconic pieces from Diana's private collection. They argued that public display would demonstrate continuity across generations. William had rejected that proposal during an informal meeting in late April. He stated clearly that his mother's private collection would not be drawn into public promotional campaigns without a specific independent purpose chosen by her sons. The draft requisition slip proved his verbal decision was being bypassed behind closed doors. He asked the trustees for the master logbook of physical visitors. The last signed entry belonged to William himself, dated November 2025. No senior member of the royal family had set foot inside since the death of Queen Elizabeth in September 2022. William turned to the second trustee and issued a direct command. The physical locks on the outer door were to be re-keyed by noon the following morning. The electronic key codes assigned to internal staff were to be wiped immediately. Entry would now require the simultaneous presence of 2 independent legal representatives. He took out his phone and called his legal secretary at Kensington Palace. He asked for an immediate audit of all internal mail logs generated between Clarence House, Marlborough House, and the Central Royal Archives over the previous 30 days. The trustee placed the loose requisition slip into a plastic archival folder. That paper was now concrete evidence of an internal breach of protocol. William walked out of the vault and watched the heavy iron door swing shut behind him. The mechanical lock clicked into place with a loud snap. As they walked up the stone stairs, the trustee asked if they should notify the private secretary to King Charles. William stopped at the top of the stairs. He told the trustee that no informal calls would be made that night. Instead, a formal written notice of security restriction would be delivered directly to Clarence House by 8 o'clock the next morning. The notice would state plainly that the subterranean archives at St. James's Palace were under total legal lockdown. It would remind all staff that any unauthorized attempt to access or transfer items from the Diana Trust constituted a direct violation of civil trust law. William got into his car outside the palace gates. The red leather document binder sat on the passenger seat beside him. The first move had been made in secret. The next move would happen in broad daylight, backed by the full weight of a legal decree signed 4 years earlier by the late Queen herself. Paper trails and vanishing inventories. The legal warning delivered to Clarence House at 8 on Wednesday morning caused an immediate flurry behind office doors. By 9, a dispatch rider left the courtyard, carrying a sealed blue envelope addressed directly to the private secretary's desk at Kensington Palace. Inside was a 2-page letter typed on official heavy cream paper. The note did not deny the digital query made 2 afternoons earlier. Instead, it framed the search as a routine administrative catalog check. The letter claimed the request had been generated by junior historical archivists preparing an internal report. They were auditing royal gifts and personal assets tied to major family anniversaries. Prince William read the letter at his desk in the morning light. He did not call Clarence House to debate the phrasing. He picked up his pen and pulled a fresh ledger file from his drawer. That file contained a complete paper trail of historical Crown estate transfers, dating back nearly 3 decades. William began cross-referencing every inventory number listed on the intercepted requisition slip with official sovereign property entries. A discrepancy appeared on page 14 of the 1997 estate settlement ledger. Following the car crash in Paris, royal attorneys drafted a strict division between official state properties and private personal possessions. The sovereign collection included ceremonial gifts presented to the royal family during official tours. The personal estate included items purchased privately or inherited directly by blood relatives. A handwritten memo attached to the back of the 1997 draft carried the signature of Diana's solicitor. The note stated clearly that all personal jewelry, private journals, and audio recordings were to remain under exclusive family control. They were not to be merged with the public holdings of the Crown estate. Yet, when William pulled the recent catalog drafts for the proposed 2027 Heritage Exhibition, 4 items from Diana's private trust had been reclassified. They appeared on a preliminary display draft under a new inventory code marked as Sovereign Historic Gifts. The items included a gold link bracelet, 2 emerald dress rings, and a pair of sapphire drop earrings worn during a state visit to Australia in 1983. Converting private trust assets into sovereign historic gifts changes their legal status entirely. Once an item is reclassified as state property, it falls under the general care of the Royal Collection Trust. The reigning monarch and their consort gain direct administrative oversight over how those items are stored, displayed, or loaned. William knew how those 4 inventory numbers made their way onto the public exhibition list. 3 months earlier, a senior curator from the Royal Collection Trust submitted a proposal to review private royal jewelry boxes stored across various residences. The stated goal was to create a single digital database for long-term insurance tracking. The request seemed harmless on paper. The curator had received verbal encouragement from senior staff operating inside Clarence House. With that verbal backing, the curator requested access to private family ledgers stored at Windsor Castle. Over 4 weeks, those 4 specific pieces of jewelry were quietly copied from the private Diana Trust registry and pasted into the public exhibition draft. The paper trail showed that the draft was forwarded to the office of Queen Camilla for review in mid-April. A clerk returned the document 2 days later with a blue checkmark next to the sapphire drop earrings. A handwritten note in the margin of the return draft read, "Verify physical location and schedule for cleaning at Marlborough House." The piece of paper proved that the attempt to access the vault beneath St. James's Palace was not a random computer glitch. It was part of an organized effort to pull private family heirlooms into public state custody. Once those items moved to Marlborough House for cleaning, they would be photographed for the 2020-27 exhibition catalog. Once published in an official catalog, returning them to a private vault becomes complicated. William called his personal legal advisor into the room. He handed him the blue checkmark draft alongside the original 1997 solicitor memo. The advisor reviewed both papers line by line. He confirmed that moving those pieces into state exhibition lists without written consent from both trust trustees violated the original 1997 agreement. William instructed his legal advisor to draft a formal demand for an immediate internal audit. Every digital database entry created by the Royal Collection Trust over the previous 6 months had to be reviewed. Any private item logged under a sovereign inventory number had to be scrubbed from the system before sunset. While the advisor prepared the legal paperwork, William noticed a secondary detail on the audit sheet. Attached to the list of 4 jewelry pieces was a reference to a small, locked black leather box kept in Section 4 of the subterranean vault. The reference code on the inventory list was listed simply as Box B7. The physical ledger showed it contained private personal letters exchanged between Diana and Queen Elizabeth during the summer of 1992. Those letters were never meant for historical archives or public exhibitions. They contained direct personal discussions regarding the official separation of the Prince and Princess of Wales. The catalog logs showed that Box B7 had also been flagged during the search query initiated from Clarence House 48 hours earlier. The discovery shifted the entire nature of the situation. This was no longer just a dispute over historical jewelry or fashion items for an upcoming museum display. Someone inside the administrative network was actively searching for sensitive personal correspondence written during one of the most painful periods in modern royal history. William closed the folder and placed it inside his desk safe. He picked up his phone and called his co-trustee, Earl Spencer. The call lasted less than 5 minutes. William outlined the paper trail, the altered inventory codes, and the flag search query targeting Box B7. Earl Spencer's response was immediate and firm. He agreed to sign any legal instrument necessary to block the transfer of trust items. He also offered to travel to London to review the physical contents of the vault in person. William told his uncle that a physical inspection would take place before the end of the week. But first, he needed to address the paper trail directly with the head of the royal household. At 2 in the afternoon, William walked across the grounds toward the main administrative offices. He carried a single manila folder containing copies of the altered catalog entries and the blue-checked memo. He did not schedule a public press briefing or make a drama out of the walk. He simply entered the private office of King Charles's chief executive secretary and placed the folder on the desk. He told the secretary that the paper trail was complete. The attempt to reclassify private trust assets as sovereign property had been documented, traced, and stopped. The secretary looked at the blue checkmark on the exhibition draft and remained silent. William stated clearly that any further attempts to alter inventory records or access the subterranean vault without written trustee authorization would result in immediate legal action through independent estate attorneys. He turned and left the office before the secretary could offer an administrative explanation. The paper trail was locked down, but the central question remained unanswered. Why had someone inside Clarence House taken such a massive legal risk to inspect the contents of Box B7? William knew the answer was not hidden inside administrative mail logs or computer database searches. It was written inside a private legal document executed 4 years earlier during the final quiet summer at Balmoral Castle. The Queen's unbroken seal. On Thursday morning, Prince William walked into the private study at Kensington Palace carrying a heavy brass key. He unlocked a dark mahogany cabinet set behind his desk. Inside sat a flat steel dispatch box painted in deep green. The box bore the official monogram of Queen Elizabeth II. He placed the box on the wooden desk and pulled a small leather pouch from his pocket. The pouch contained a silver key stamped with a 3-digit archive code. He turned the key, opened the lid, and lifted out a thick parchment envelope. The envelope was secured with red sealing wax. The wax carried the distinct impression of the late Queen's personal signet ring. Across the front, written in black ink, was a date, August 14th, 2022. That date was significant. It was recorded just 3 weeks before Queen Elizabeth passed away at Balmoral Castle. William took a small letter opener from his desk and carefully sliced through the top fold of the paper. Keeping the wax seal completely intact, he pulled out 3 pages of heavy cream paper. This was the private codicil. It was drafted by the Queen's personal solicitor, notarized in Edinburgh, and witnessed by 2 senior royal archivists. The text was plain, direct, and written in clear legal prose. The document explicitly addressed the future management of all private royal vaults, personal estates, and historical family archives. Clause 4 specifically named the subterranean vault beneath St. James's Palace. The late Queen wrote that all items belonging to the private estate of Princess Diana were to remain under the absolute control of her sons. The text explicitly stated that no future Queen consort, sovereign advisor, or Crown Estate Committee would possess any legal right of access, inspection, or display. To make the boundary absolute, Queen Elizabeth inserted a specific protective mechanism into the text. She invoked an old royal trust law established in 1872. That law allows a reigning monarch to create an unchangeable private covenant over personal family property. Under those terms, the rights passed directly down bloodlines, skipping standard crown authority entirely. William read through the second page carefully. A handwritten note appeared right below Clause 4, written in the Queen's familiar, sharp handwriting. The note stated that personal letters, private audio tapes, and sensitive correspondence held inside the vault were protected by sovereign immunity. They could never be requisitioned by palace officials, regardless of their position or title. The late Queen had anticipated this exact scenario 4 years before it unfolded. She knew that once the crown passed to her son, administrative pressure would build inside Clarence House. She understood that efforts would be made to unify royal collections, smooth over past divisions, and bring private family archives under general palace control. By executing this codicil in complete secrecy, Queen Elizabeth built a legal wall around Diana's legacy that no administrative memo or database query could break. William laid the 3 pages flat on his desk. He picked up his phone and placed a call to Sir Edward Young, the former private secretary who had overseen the late Queen's personal papers during her final months in Scotland. William asked him directly about the drafting of the August 2022 decree. Sir Edward confirmed the facts. During the final summer in the Highlands, Queen Elizabeth held several private meetings with her legal team. She asked for a thorough review of all non-state trusts, specifically focusing on items tied to the Spencer family line. She wanted to ensure that after her death, no internal palace maneuvering could override the original 1997 trust agreement. Sir Edward recalled that when the Queen signed the document, she ordered it placed inside a green dispatch box and delivered directly to William. She instructed that it remain sealed until an unauthorized attempt was made to alter the inventory of the vault. The mystery of why the late queen had acted with such extreme discretion was now completely clear. She was not just protecting old jewelry or museum items. She was protecting the historical narrative of the monarchy itself. She knew that inside Box B7 sat records that documented the exact nature of the royal family's internal friction during the 1990s. If those records were brought into General Palace archives, they could be edited, reclassified, or quietly suppressed in the name of institutional harmony. Queen Elizabeth wanted those records to remain exactly where Diana had left them, protected by her eldest son. William pulled a high-resolution scanner across his desk and digitized all 3 pages of the decree. He created a secure file and attached the digital scan to a fresh legal memorandum. He then drafted a formal covering letter addressed to the private secretary to King Charles. The letter was brief and uncompromising. William stated that the late Queen's final decree was now formally unsealed and active. He attached the digital copy of Clause 4 and noted that the original parchment would remain in his personal possession. He added a final, clear instruction. Any future request regarding the vault at St. James's Palace would be met with the immediate enforcement of the 1997 Trust Law and the 2022 Covenant. William placed the copy inside a red leather binder, closed the green dispatch box, and locked it back inside the mahogany cabinet. He picked up the red binder and stood up from his desk. The paper trail had been traced, the breach had been documented, and the late Queen's legal shield was now fully exposed. The next step would not happen through letters or dispatches sent between palace offices. William walked out of his study, boarded his vehicle, and ordered his driver to take him straight to Windsor Castle. It was time to present the unsealed decree directly to his father and stepmother. Confrontation at the dining table. The rain tapped against the high glass windows of the private dining room at Windsor Castle as 4 footmen cleared the soup bowls. King Charles sat at the head of the long oak table, dressed in a gray suit. Queen Camilla sat to his right, wearing a blue silk day dress. Prince William sat directly opposite her, his hands resting flat on the polished table. A single red leather folder sat right next to William's water glass. No one spoke until the footman stepped out and closed the heavy oak doors. The room fell into a heavy, expectant quiet. William did not wait for small talk. He picked up the red binder, opened it, and slid a single printed page across the white tablecloth toward his father. Charles picked up his reading glasses, put them on, and looked down at the paper. It was the high-resolution scan of the 2022 decree, featuring his mother's signature and the distinct red wax signet impression. Charles read the 3 paragraphs in silence. His brow furrowed as his eyes hit Clause 4. Camilla leaned slightly to her left, trying to read the text over her husband's arm. She saw the heading printed across the top of the page, "The Private Codicil of Queen Elizabeth II." William spoke clearly across the table. He stated that 48 hours earlier, an administrative login attempt had been launched from Clarence House targeting the subterranean vault at St. James's Palace. He added that a draft requisition slip had already been generated to move 6 archival boxes to Marlborough House. Camilla sat back in her chair and set her napkin down. She told William that he was making a mountain out of a routine administrative check. She explained that her office was simply helping curators organize historical items for the upcoming 2027 Heritage Showcase. William did not raise his voice. He reached into his folder and pulled out the second piece of paper. The draft inventory list, bearing the blue ink checkmark and the handwritten margin note from her clerk. He placed it right beside the king's dinner plate. He pointed to the blue checkmark next to the sapphire drop earrings worn by Princess Diana in 1983. He then pointed to the inventory code for Box B7, which contained private personal letters between his mother and the late Queen. Charles looked down at his wife's handwriting on the margin of the sheet. The color left his face. He had not been told about the draft requisition form. He knew nothing about the blue checkmark or the request to move Box B7. Charles turned to Camilla and asked her directly if she had authorized her team to request access to the vault keys. Camilla hesitated for a second before answering. She stated that her staff was looking for a specific set of historical sapphire brooches originally gifted to the family by Queen Victoria. She claimed her curators believed those brooches had been cataloged inside the Diana estate collection by mistake back in 1997. It was a plausible explanation, but it raised a critical legal question. If her staff was looking for 19th century brooches, Why had they flagged a sealed box of personal correspondence written during the 1990s? William answered that question before anyone else could speak. He informed them that the late Queen had anticipated this exact dispute during her final summer at Balmoral Castle. He read Clause 4 out loud to the room. The words were unmistakable. Queen Elizabeth had placed absolute legal authority over those boxes in the hands of her eldest grandson and his heirs. She had explicitly written that no future queen consort would ever hold administrative power over Diana's private possessions. The legal reality sank into the room like lead. The late Queen had bypassed her own son's sovereign prerogative to build an ironclad boundary around her former daughter-in-law's private estate. Charles placed both hands on the table and looked at his wife. He said quietly that the matter was settled. He stated that his mother's final decree was binding and that no further inventory checks would be requested by Clarence House. Camilla looked at William, her posture rigid. She asked what would happen to the items already cataloged for the Heritage Showcase. William closed his red folder and stood up from the table. He informed her that every private item belonging to his mother had already been scrubbed from the public exhibition lists. He added that the locks on the vault below St. James's Palace had been changed 3 hours earlier. From that moment on, no one would enter the vault without his written consent and the physical presence of Earl Spencer. Charles nodded once, accepting the terms without argument. He knew his mother's handwriting, he knew the law, and he knew his son was fully within his rights. William picked up his leather folder, bowed slightly to his father, and turned toward the doors. He did not look back as he walked out of the dining room. The legal battle over the vault had ended in a total shutdown. But as William walked down the long corridor toward the courtyard, he knew a new question was rising. If Camilla's team was really searching for Victoria's lost sapphire brooches, where were those brooches actually hidden? The paper trail inside box B7 was about to reveal an even deeper secret: biometric locks and bloodline trustees. At 10 o'clock on Friday morning, a black van pulled into the cobbled courtyard behind St. James's Palace. 3 technicians carrying heavy silver toolboxes walked down the stone basement steps. They were escorted by 2 private security officers wearing non-uniform suit jackets. Prince William arrived 20 minutes later, dressed in a plain coat and carrying a navy leather briefcase. Inside the basement hallway, the technicians went to work on the iron door frame. They removed the traditional brass lock tumbler and unscrewed the standard digital keypad. In their place, they mounted a reinforced brushed steel faceplate. The new assembly featured a dual biometric scanner capable of reading iris patterns and encrypted thumbprints. Beside the digital glass sat a dual key tumbler system requiring 2 customized physical keyblades to turn at the same moment. William stood against the stone wall, watching the installation. He held a small black box containing the newly programmed master keyblades. At 11 o'clock, steps echoed down the corridor stairs. Earl Spencer walked into the dimly lit hallway, shaking his nephew's hand. He carried a small leather folder containing his official trustee credentials. The presence of Diana's brother inside the palace basement was a firm statement. The Spencer family was officially stepping back onto royal ground to protect their sister's legacy. The head technician calibrated the biometric screen and asked William to step forward. William placed his right thumb on the glass scanner and looked directly into the iris camera. The system gave a soft electronic chime, saving his biometric signature into a local, air-gapped hard drive mounted inside the safe room wall. The drive was completely disconnected from the broader palace computer network. No user logging into a terminal at Clarence House or Kensington Palace could ever reach the software driving this door. Earl Spencer stepped up next. He placed his thumb on the scanner and completed his own iris scan. Under the new security program, opening the door required both men to be physically present. Alternatively, it required one trustee alongside an independent legal representative appointed by the High Court in London. Once the electronic testing finished, William pulled the 2 customized keyblades from his black box. He handed one keyblade directly to his uncle and kept the second keyblade for himself. Earl Spencer placed his key into the top cylinder. William placed his key into the bottom cylinder. They turned the keyblades clockwise in unison. A heavy steel bolt slid backward with a solid mechanical thud. The technicians gathered their tools, packed their silver boxes, and walked back up the stairs under escort. William and his uncle stepped inside the cool room and closed the door behind them. They walked straight to Section 4, stopping in front of the shelf holding Box B7. Earl Spencer pulled out his reading glasses and looked at the handwritten tag attached to the handle. The tag listed private letters exchanged during the summer of 1992. He asked William if they should examine the contents of the box to confirm nothing had been altered or removed during previous cataloging checks. William pulled a small key from his briefcase and opened the brass latch on Box B7. Inside lay 4 bound folders wrapped in ribbon, along with a small velvet jewelry box tucked in the back corner. That jewelry box was not listed on the outer inventory tag. William picked up the velvet box and opened the lid. Inside sat 2 small silver brooches set with single dark blue sapphires. These were the lost 19th century sapphire brooches originally belonging to Queen Victoria. The mystery of why Camilla's clerks were searching for Victoria's lost jewels was suddenly solved. The brooches were not lost inside the Crown estate vaults, nor had they been stolen. During the chaotic division of assets in 1996, Queen Elizabeth had personally handed those 2 brooches to Diana for safekeeping. She intended for Diana to pass them directly to future granddaughters born into the family line. Diana had placed them inside Box B7 alongside her personal letters, keeping them completely off the official Crown lists. Camilla's staff had traced historical references to the brooches and realized they were tied to Box B7. They were trying to recover state history, but they had attempted to bypass the family trust to do it. Earl Spencer looked down at the brooches, then at his nephew. He noted that the items clearly belonged to the personal bloodline trust. William closed the velvet box and placed it back inside Box B7. He locked the latch and secured the box on the metal shelf. The lost brooches were safe, protected by biometric code and bloodline law. But as William locked the outer iron vault door behind them, he knew one final task remained. He needed to set a permanent institutional precedent so that no future monarch or consort would ever challenge these boundaries again. An unshakable guard over legacy. On Monday afternoon, a black saloon car pulled into the private courtyard at Highgrove House. Prince William stepped out, holding a thin leather envelope. He walked into the ground floor study, where his father sat reviewing estate accounts. William placed the envelope flat on the wooden desk. Inside sat a single page printed on thick official paper. It was a fresh legal instrument drafted by High Court solicitors in London. The document formally registered the 2022 codicil with the official estate trustees. It bound all future Crown administrations to the exact terms set by Queen Elizabeth. The paperwork established a permanent legal firewall. No monarch, spouse, or palace committee could ever reclassify, display, or access items held inside the private trust without written consent from Princess Diana's direct heirs. William asked his father to countersign the registration page as head of the family line. King Charles looked at the document, picked up his fountain pen, and signed his name at the bottom. The signature officially closed the administrative file on the vault at St. James's Palace. 2 nights later, the royal family attended a formal dinner at Buckingham Palace honoring visiting diplomatic envoys. Photographers lined the grand staircase as senior royals entered the ballroom. Catherine, Princess of Wales, walked down the stairs beside William. Pinned to the lapel of her deep green gown was one of the silver and sapphire brooches from Box B7. It was the first time the historic piece had been worn in public since 1996. The gesture was quiet, deliberate, and impossible to misunderstand. The brooch had not been absorbed into state collections or displayed in a commercial showcase. It remained in the hands of Diana's direct family, passed down exactly as intended. Across the room, Queen Camilla stood with diplomats, her staff making no mention of the recent inventory checks or museum drafts. The public saw an elegant piece of family history on display, but inside palace walls, the message was clear. William had not simply blocked an administrative query, he had enforced his grandmother's final decree and established how he intends to govern when his own reign begins. Authority inside the monarchy would not be dictated by palace bureaucracy or quiet backroom maneuvers. It would rest on clear legal boundaries, bloodline trust, and respect for personal legacy. The subterranean vault beneath St. James's Palace remains locked behind dual biometric scanners and heavy iron doors. The keyblades remain separated between London and the Spencer family estate. Inside Box B7, the remaining letters, audio tapes, and personal heirlooms sit undisturbed. They are protected by a legal shield forged during a quiet summer in Scotland, enforced by a son who refused to let his mother's memory be rewritten. Prince William's swift action proves that when it comes to protecting his mother's memory, palace protocol comes second. By enforcing Queen Elizabeth's final decree, he drew an unshakable line through the House of Windsor, sending a message that will shape his own future reign. What do you think of William taking such a firm stand over the private archives? Did Queen Elizabeth make the right choice by bypassing standard authority to protect Diana's legacy? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this look behind palace doors, give this video a like, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a deep dive into royal history.